Hello everyone, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this Yangyi Judge Club video on how to judge parliamentary debate, often referred to in shorthand as Parley. Now I'd like to note that if you'd like a much more broad version of how to judge speech and debate in general, I'd highly encourage you to view our video titled How to Judge Speech and Debate. And that is a great video that covers all types of speech and debate events, not just parliamentary debate. However, without further ado, let's jump straight into how to judge parliamentary debate. Today we'll aim to cover a brief introduction of parliamentary debate and then move on to basically how to judge a round. You first have to know how to decide a round, evaluate speakers, and then lastly, how to fill out the ballot in front of you. So first, let's go over a brief introduction of parliamentary debate for those who are new to this form. So what parliamentary debate is it's a two-on-two debate format. So there will be two debaters on the affirmation side, which is for the resolution, and two debaters on the negation side, who are against the resolution. Now, these two debaters will take turns for their side, debating on the given topic. Now, there is also another term for affirmation and negation, and that is government versus opposition. So affirmation is also the same as government, while opposition is also the same as negation. And I'll cover this in a little bit more detail later on in this video. Now, it's important to note that this debate format is mostly seen in California. So most likely, if you're going to be judging a parliamentary debate round, it's going to be a tournament based in California. Now, this is a limited prep time debate format. So what this means is that there will be a resolution announced at the start of the debate, most likely in the round, and the debaters will be given only 20 minutes to prep their case and then present it. Note that there is no running prep time like other debate rounds, such as PF, where they are given certain running prep times to deliver. Now let's go on to speaker order and speech times. This is one of the most confusing parts of parliamentary debate, but once you get the hang of it, it comes pretty naturally. So what I've done is I've highlighted first speaker in this lighter blue and second speaker in this darker blue. So the round will start off with a 7-minute constructed speech from the affirmation that lays out the case for the first time for the affirmation. And then you're going to expect an 8-minute negation constructive that basically lays out the negation case, but also aims to refute the affirmations case. And then we're going to move on to constructive speeches, which will come from the second speaker of each prospective side. So there will be an 8-minute affirmation constructive from the second speaker that's hoping to defend the affirmation case and then also refute the negation for the first time, while after that will be a 8-minute negation constructive from the second speaker that will defend the negation and refute the affirmation. And then we're going to go back to the second cycle of first speakers, and the negation first speaker will deliver a 4-minute negation rebuttal where they will summarize the most important arguments in this case and just basically explain why negation should win this round. And then lastly, we'll hear from a 5-minute affirmation rebuttal, which is pretty similar to the negation rebuttal, and also summarizes the voting issues, which are basically the easiest places to vote. And it's important to note that voting issues could also pop up in negation rebuttals, but they are oftentimes more prominent in affirmation rebuttals. Okay, so continuing on that alternative format of government and opposition. So this is also one of those things that are pretty confusing. So sometimes in certain rounds or certain debaters from different schools might refer to the first speaker on affirmation as prime minister and the second speaker on affirmation as member of government. And then the negation might refer to their first speaker as leader of opposition and then the second speaker as member of opposition. There really isn't any difference between first speaker on affirmation and first speaker on negation. It's just a different way of referring to things, especially given this sort of parliamentary theme that's going on with this debate. So just let's dive a little bit deeper into what to expect in each speech, although I've covered it briefly already. So what constructors are basically meant to do, so this will be the first and second speech from each side. They're basically meant to build arguments and set the framework and also reply to the opponent's case. Meanwhile, rebuttals, which are basically the last speeches from each side, are meant to weigh arguments, compare impacts, and also crystallize the round for the judge. They basically tell you why you should vote for their side and why you shouldn't vote for the other side. And so this is important to keep in mind for what you're supposed to be looking for from each speech. Now, note that a pretty important rule in parliamentary debate is that there shouldn't be any new arguments brought up in rebuttals, but there can be new responses to these arguments. Now let's move on to deciding the round. Basically, how do you decide who wins? So, first of all, I think it's important to cover your role as a debate judge. Now, we've already covered this portion in the video titled "How to Judge Speech and Debate," but this is just a quick refresher. So, as a debate judge, you are meant to neutrally judge two sides arguing on a given topic. So, what you usually do is that you're expected to take notes on the round. This is often referred to as flow. Debaters may refer to flow, which is basically just the notes on the round. So these notes will basically consist of the main arguments in the round and whether or not they've been responded to and what these responses are. And then after that, you're supposed to decide which side wins. This is usually based on arguments and logic, which is different from speech. And then also you are, in the end, expected to give feedback on the round and a reason for decision in the ballot, which we will cover later. And then also speaker scores, which once again we will also cover. So first of all, let's decide who wins. So some things that you should compare to see who wins is, first of all, which arguments were extended and defended. So what this means is once an argument is introduced to this round, it may be countered. However, the side that introduces this argument should do work in order to extend this argument, which basically means that if this argument isn't responded to, they have to further extend this argument or basically bring this argument up again to ensure that they still have access to the impacts to this argument. And then also defend it. You should look for arguments that are properly defended, that are no longer able to be valid in this debate, and which the respective side that introduces this argument should not be able to gain ground from that argument anymore. You should also see which side provided stronger impacts. So each argument should have an impact. For example, if someone could argue that this argument, their side will lead to 100 lives saved, and this is an impact in terms of basically what benefit or harm does a certain case give. And common ways to basically decide which impact is better is scope, magnitude, and probability. So scope is basically how many people you're affecting. Magnitude is basically how large your impact is, and probability is obviously how likely this impact is going to occur. And then you should also see which side did a better job of weighing and framing the round. Not only is debate built upon which side has the best arguments and which side has responded to the other's arguments the best, but also which side is helping the judge the most. You should award people who are basically helping your judging process be easier. They tell you where you should be looking at and why they win on this certain aspect, and also they basically spread out the round well for you. And so your decision should be who won the debate as presented in the round. And this is oftentimes very important and is brought up in many types of debate, as it is expected for judges to come into these rounds tabula rasa or with a clean slate. They should not bring in any outside prejudices or opinions that they have from the outside world into this debate round. They should come into this debate round to basically as someone who is willing to learn from this debate and not bring in anything else. A quick generalization of just what I covered is whichever side presents the best case and refutes the others, the best should win. And then furthermore, judges should weigh arguments, not personal beliefs. And this is often very important to keep in mind. So now let's quickly go on to how to evaluate speakers. So this is pretty simple. Basically, through evaluating speakers, this is kept in mind usually for speaker points, but also basically for how well they deliver this case. And so you should look out for clarity, organization, or persuasiveness, the use of time effectively, and a great style. Are they professional, engaging, and confident? And also, it's important to know how easy is it to understand them. And so if a debater does all of these things well, you should reward them in terms of speaker points by giving them higher points, which we will cover later on. Now let's go over the ballot. How should you be filling out a parliamentary debate ballot? So first of all, on this ballot, probably the most important thing is going to be the decision and reason for decision. So unlike speeches where you basically rank the speakers, Here, you're going to be choosing the winner, either the affirmation side or the negation side. So, whichever side you think won this debate, you should be choosing them to win. And then you will also have to give a reason for decision in the ballot. This will be a text box, and there will most of the time be a word limit for what you will have to adhere to. And in this reason for decision, you're basically just explaining which side won and why, based on your arguments presented. You should oftentimes refer to points of clash, which is basically points where both sides disagreed on, or the critical points in this debate. And keep in mind that this shouldn't be personal opinion or outside knowledge. And then also try to be as specific and educational in your comments. Keep in mind that these debaters are often looking to this reason for decision as a secondary source to see why they lost and also for improvement. So reasons for decisions and obviously decisions are going to be very important as you're basically deciding the outcome of this round for these debaters. Now, let's go back to speaker points, often referred to as speaks. So some debaters might refer to this during the speech, although it's very uh, uncommon, but basically a debate slang for speaker points is going to be speaks. This is basically where you're going to be rating speakers' performances. So there will be the name of the speaker, and you will have to rank them on typically on a scale of 20 to 30, so 30 being the highest. But however, this might vary with tournament rules. For example, I know that the Tournament of Champions circuit, if I'm not mistaken, is on a scale of 25 to 30. So it oftentimes just varies with the tournament, and you should check the tournament handbook for these rules. However, it's just important to note that typically it will be on a scale of 20 to 30, and it will be in increments of 0.1. And so you can give 20.1, 20.2, or 21, etc. So you should be rewarding, as I said, clarity, strategy, persuasiveness, and organization for a speaker. And this is basically for speaking ranks. So not only will debaters be able to receive awards for how well their team does in terms of the tournament and winning these rounds, but also how well they speak in terms of individual debating. And then it's also sometimes a best practice to keep points balanced across team members. You don't want team members to have such a high point and their teammate to have really low points rather. It's oftentimes best practice to just try to keep them as even as possible. And so a quick uh, just easy rubric would be 30 is excellent. You're clear, persuasive, strategic. 29 to 28 would be strong. You're a solid debater with minor issues. 27 was average, understandable, but unpolished or inconsistent. And then 26 or below would be significant clarity or behavior issues. However, oftentimes tournament handbooks may give you different rubrics to grade with. It's often just important to check with the respective tournament rules. And then lastly, you will be also asked to give speaker feedback. So this is usually given to an entire team. So both speakers from each side will receive the same speaker feedback, which is sort of different from speech. However, what you're basically doing here, is that you're telling the speakers or on each side what you liked about what there's debate and where that you think they can improve. And this is oftentimes used for debaters to learn and grow. And so oftentimes I'd like to encourage you to try to be as specific and educational as possible, just like the reasons for decision in terms of speaker feedback. It's important to put effort into this to ensure that the debaters get the most out of this round and are actively working to improve. And then lastly, let's just talk about some key takeaways that you should take away from this video. First of all, it's important to be fair and objective as a debate judge. You're basically deciding who wins a round, and so thus it's important to try to keep in mind that a team's tournament might depend on your shoulders, and so it's important to try to be as fair and objective as possible. Furthermore, try to flow carefully. Try to ensure that you're keeping tabs on the round, and also one thing that I forgot to mention is that to not intervene during this round. Uh, you should wait until a speaker finishes their speech, or even until the very end of this round to ask questions or maybe clarifying questions. Don't try to interrupt someone's speech to ask a question unless it's extremely urgent. Furthermore, base decisions on what is said in the round, not personal beliefs that you bring into this round. And also, it's important to give constructive feedback for growth. These debaters are looking to you to improve and grow as debaters, and thus they really value this feedback. And thank you. So, thus, I'd like to thank you for watching this video on how to judge parliamentary debate. I hope that it was helpful to you. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to email us at the email address linked in the description. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.